went all in, played my cards right. Up the ante, won blackjack all night. Roll the dice, let it ride. What are the odds I got snake eyes?
Entrepreneur Perspectives is produced by Quiet Loud Studios, a production company and content network. Learn more at quietloudstudios.com.
As always, I'm in my car, so I pulled over on the way to Charlotte in a park in Lexington so I could give you a call. So how's your day been so far?
It's been good so far. It's Monday, but so far it's been productive and had a great weekend, so I have no complaints.
Okay. Well, I was telling somebody the other day, they were saying, what are you doing this weekend? And I said, absolutely nothing. And it's glorious that I don't have to do anything, so because I spend a lot of time running up and down the road. But just really wanted to start off by just kind of listening to your story and kind of, where did you grow up and education, and then kind of, how you got into the insurance business.
Great. Well, thanks for letting me be on your podcast, Mitch. It's always fun to chat with you. I grew up down in Hampstead, North Carolina, which is between Wilmington and Topsail Beach, and went to Topsail High School and graduated from there and went to UNC Chapel Hill. And, they say you spend your whole youth trying to get away from home and your whole adult life trying to get back. And that's been kind of the story for me.
Yeah, that's a great area. I love Wrightsville Beach. Yeah, most definitely. So did your team play Michael Jordan's team down there in Wilmington?
No, Topsail High was a 1A school back when I was there. So we didn't get to play the big guys in Wilmington. But yeah, Michael Jordan went to high school not too far from me, but he was a little bit ahead of me at Chapel Hill.
Okay. It's funny, a friend of ours, my son played basketball, and a friend of ours worked at a bank with Michael Jordan's mother. And she said that she would leave, when school was getting out, and she said that, when he was 12 and 11, she would go pick him up from school and bring him back to work, and she would sit in the parking lot. He would sit in the parking lot while she worked and do his homework. And she said, of course, you didn't know who he was, but she said, I remember Mrs. Jordan's son out in the car doing his homework, and it was Michael Jordan. So it's kind of funny. But so what was your degree in, just out of curiosity?
So my degree was in journalism with a concentration in advertising.
And did you go into that field?
I never did. I used up all my creative ideas in my classes, and I had to go do something else because I just ran out of catchy sayings. And of course, we didn't have any artificial intelligence or any of those tools back then. Everything was hand-drawn. So it's been fun looking back through some of my old hand-drawn advertising projects from 1986 to 88.
Oh, that's cool.
Just to see how simple everything was back in the day.
Yep. What was your first job?
So my first job was actually in the insurance business. I got an interview with Jefferson Pilot, and I drove to Greensboro from Chapel Hill, interviewed with him, and everybody I met with was super nice. Remember back in the days, they used to have a group schools.
Right.
JP had a group school that a lot of folks went through that program, and they hired me as a service rep. And it was great because you got a free company car and gas, and they sent you to a territory somewhere. Basically, it was up to them as to which market you might be a good fit in. They thought I was a good fit for Nashville, Tennessee. So I loaded up my U-Haul and pulled my boat behind it and ended up in Nashville.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
It was a great experience.
How long were you there?
I was there 2 years. And with the JP program, you start out as a service rep, and then they look to see how you do in that role, and they determine whether or not you're somebody that needs to be in a service role or a sales role. And so after a couple of years, they invited me to move back to Greensboro in the local market office as a small group sales representative. So when I moved back,
I heard a story about you, a mutual friend, Rick Powers. I heard that the car that you got was one of the ones that he'd used before at some point, and he used to drive his old bulldog around all the time, and he said he had to clean all the dog hair out of the car so that he could turn it over to you, is what he told me. So,
yeah. So his story is partially true. He may have thought that he had cleaned the car, but the folks at the home office didn't think the car was clean enough, and so I ended up having to clean the car.
Okay.
And It smelled so bad that I dumped a box of Febreze and just left it overnight to try to get the bulldog stench out.
Yeah, it's a small world. And talking about Jefferson Pilot, there's a lot of people around here that worked for Jefferson Pilot previously, and I could name a lot of names that started their careers at JP. So that's a good story. So that's sort of similar to what I did. I went to UNC Charlotte, and you think about my degree was in political science and criminal justice, and I guess that prepares you for a career in insurance because I did an on-campus interview with an insurance company over in Winston-Salem and kind of a management training program and kind of came up to this area and took that job. And that's kind of how I started off. Now, I had some family history. My mother was in the insurance business for 40 years, and then both of my daughters are in the insurance business. So it's sort of a family business, but that's kind of how I started as well, kind of on campus interview. My degree had nothing to do with insurance at all. I think now you can actually get a degree in insurance, and some of these colleges are actually offering those type of degrees. So how long did you stay at Jefferson Pilot?
I was at JP for about 5 years, and then I got an opportunity. My wife was at the time was a nurse, and she went back to grad school to become a nurse practitioner. And while she was in that transition period, I got an opportunity to interview with a pharmaceutical company, and I ended up getting the job selling female healthcare products like birth control pills and
There you go.
hormones. And so I thought, wow, that'll be a different type of thing. I'll make more money. I'll have a better day. And so I left. And for 2 years, I was a territory rep for Wyeth Ayerst, selling birth control pills and hormones.
Oh, wow.
And I realized how much I missed the insurance agency after that. And so fortunately, I was able to get back in with JP after just 2 years in pharmaceutical sales. That's a tough job.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that it can be lucrative, but it's also a very, very tough job, and you're moving around all the time. So you came back to Jefferson Pilot, and then at some point you went out into being an agent, right?
Yeah, I went back to JP and they moved me in the home office, and I was a product manager for dental products, disability, and then stop loss 3 different times. I worked as JP thought about starting an HMO back in the early 90s, and JP decided not to start the HMO, and they started divesting the group division at that time. And so I went to work for UnitedHealthcare and stayed there about 10 years, worked my way from sales into sales management, and then I was VP of sales for the North and South Carolina. And at that point, I made the decision to leave and become a broker.
Okay. Were you an agency owner as well?
No, I never was. The agency that I worked in got purchased by a large national brokerage that was owned by private equity. And so I was at that agency for about 13 years. I stayed about 3.5 years post acquisition, and that's when I came over here to Pinnacle.
Okay. And now you're kind of in a dual role. You're a producer, but at the same time you're also the manager of HPB Insurance, which is part of the Pinnacle financial planning umbrella. And I joke around and say you're like the perfect manager. You seem to have the right temperament, and you know the right things to say. And I guess, how did you come by those management skills? Just, I guess, experience through your working years.
I think it was just experience. I tell people I'm like the duck. I'm up here calm on the surface, but I'm swimming furiously underneath the water. But I think a lot of it just had to do with just treating people the way I wanted to be treated and treating people with respect. And that's kind of one of my core values. And so I subscribe to the whole servant leadership model. And, I don't ask anybody to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So I think that's helped to help me in my people managing skills.
Earlier in my career, I was a manager, and I managed, in the P&C world, there was a premium finance company where I worked. I managed that unit. I managed the collections area. I managed the underwriting area at one time. I also managed the information technology area at one time. And I did that long enough to figure out that I didn't want to manage anybody. So I admire the skills that you have, because you just, like I said, you seem to have the right demeanor, the right temperament. Although, there's a lot of people at Pinnacle that are that way. I think of some of the financial planners, Lance Collins always comes to mind. He's one of my favorites. And Lance just seems to be able to solve any problem that arises. And he just, I'll see a roadblock and Lance, oh, I can handle that. Don't worry about it. And he gets it handled. So that's kind of, I put you in that same category. But, I jumped out in sales as well. In fact, when I got into the sales world, I didn't even have my license. So the first week that I was in sales was spent doing the pre-licensing to get my life license. And again, I came from an insurance family, so I wasn't completely ignorant, but just starting from ground zero in sales can be tough. What do you think the challenge is today kind of in the sales world in our industry? What do you think those challenges are?
Gosh, there's so many challenges today that we didn't have back when you and I started in the business years ago. But I think just getting in front of people is tough right now in this marketplace. And I think these young folks that are coming up in the sales roles, the ones that are unafraid to reach out are the ones that are going to have success, because our society is so fast paced now. People just don't have time, and you've got so many more things that you need to do. I remember, Mitch, back when I started, I sound like an old codger, but remember the pink slips that they would take a message and leave the pink slips on your desk?
Absolutely.
And I remember being able to, go through my pink slips at the end of the day and get caught up, and I was done for the day.
Yep.
And now you're never done. You've always got tons of emails coming in, tons of phone calls to answer. And so I think just being able to be aggressive, get in front of people, solve problems, provide solutions, and those are the keys for success. And I told a younger agent not too long ago, I said, one of the secrets to my success over the years was just the answering phone calls, returning messages, and now emails. You stay in front of people and you're returning phone calls and answering messages, you're going to get more wins.
Yep.
Because that separates you from the pack, because most people just don't do that on a timely basis.
I know that's a big time Pinnacle philosophy is I like the 3-ring rule, where people have to answer the phone, that they're not going to a voicemail or going to a call center. And it's amazing how many times, no matter what branch I call or what office I call, somebody's picking that phone up in 3 rings and is trying to help you. But I'm big on that too. Follow-up's a big deal. And, doing what you say. I just had a client, in fact, you signed the application the other day on a client that we had before, and he had asked me a question during our meeting. And I am very big on making sure that I try to call back. I mean, that's really important. So I think when I called him to give him the information he'd asked for, he was sort of surprised that I called him back, that quickly. And so that's one of my things. So I think that fits well with the Pinnacle philosophy of just what you just said, is following up and trying to be in front of people and returning calls. Back when I started too, most of the meetings were face to face. You were actually going out and meeting people where they were, either at their business or at their home. Don't do so much of that anymore. How has technology kind of changed the way you communicate with your clients?
It's interesting because I feel like you do. I think that getting in front of people and having those face-to-face meetings, you can't really replace that. But since COVID, it's been interesting. I always give my clients the ability to meet in person or meet via Zoom or Teams. And the majority of them these days are so busy, they just want to meet over the internet through Zoom or or even just the phone. And I find that so interesting. I don't think it's because they don't want to see me. They just have so many things going on that it's just more convenient. And so I would say probably 90% of my renewal meetings now are done over Zoom call versus in person.
Yep. Yeah, that's the thing too. And I guess COVID really kind of forced you to up your game on the technology. And I do a ton of applications on DocuSign. Just did one this morning that you signed. That's a very, very nice case. And I think what the technology and the Zoom calls has allowed us to do is you really get out of the state that you're, where you live. So we're doing business in Virginia, Maryland, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, places where you might not be able to go have a meeting very easily. And yet now you can, we're writing nice cases in other states, and the technology's really allowed that.
Yeah, it is incredible what we can do today that we couldn't do. And I really feel like AI is going to continue to transform our agencies, and it's going to be a lot quicker than we even expect today.
Yeah, we're already seeing some of that creep in. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was at a conference last week with a commercial insurance carrier down in Texas, and their chief information officer was just talking about, the systems that they're trying out and the new things that they're doing. And of course, they're coming at it from a very carefully thought out perspective, but just the abilities that we're going to have in the next 2 years, I think it's going to be transformative to the agency model. But I'm not worried about my job because I feel like people still need that person that they can call when there's a problem.
Yep.
And a chatbot generally isn't that person. So you still need that human interaction, but it's going to make other things work, I think, a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, we're already seeing some of that, creeping into what we're doing. I know that for me, the life insurance companies are relying more and more on databases and things that they can access versus old-fashioned underwriters who are looking at cases. They're just using database underwriting. I think there's a caution there that, that they need to, because we've had some cases where, a client got declined off a database, and then we had to go in and disprove what was on that database. So that's to me, it was really the insurance company should have asked more questions versus just making a decision. So I think there's some kinks to be worked out in the industry about how you're going to use that information. So I do see it coming, and Eric and I have talked about that, it's coming one way or another. So we're going to have to embrace it in what we do.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more of it on the health insurance side. They used to rely on those one-page questionnaires that had 5 different questions that an employer would answer. And now, they still ask for those when you're doing underwriting, but they're using AI systems to screen people. And we've got this one carrier that we've used comes up with a very robust report that just from basic census information, no claims, they can come up with just about anything related to the high cost drugs or the high risk people on that group. So we've used that a lot in selling renewals, is to say, okay, here's what Medical Underwriting Bureau or whoever says about the risk of your group. And this is how the carrier is justifying your increase.
Right. How do you feel? I think a lot of different types of insurance, we're seeing the premiums go way up. I know the health insurance market's one that's seen, increases in premium. And so the employers, I guess, are struggling to try to figure out how to manage that. For me personally, I'm self-employed. So of course I'm paying for my own health insurance. It was $1,100 a month last year. It's $1,400 a month this year. And it's getting to the point where, you start having to think about how am I going to manage this because it's probably going to go up again. And then, the funny thing is life insurance really hasn't increased. The prices haven't increased, but we're seeing the property and casualty clients, those prices are going up. The homeowners insurance is going up. How do you see that affecting, our ability to sell over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, it certainly makes it more challenging on the health insurance side. In the small group space under 50 in North Carolina, we are seeing high teens and low 20s as a standard rate increase in that book of business.
Right. And there's really no place to go, right?
Well, you've got your Blue Cross and UnitedHealthcare for those under 50, and then you can occasionally get a quote out of Aetna on the small business side. But I have started looking at other markets like Gravy Healthcare, which is a level funded product. Great American is a level funded product. Nationwide has a level funded product. We're just looking for solutions. I have a group right now that's about 80 employees that got a 40% rate increase.
Wow.
And they've been declined by 4 of the top carriers. So, your Uniteds, your Cignas, your Aetnas, your Blue Cross Blue Shield. And so we're having to go to other markets and look at other types of funding mechanisms to try to place that business. So it certainly has made it more challenging. On the personal insurance side, anybody that drives a car, owns a home, knows that those rates are going up.
Oh, yeah.
Dramatically. And they continue. North Carolina passed a law that they could raise auto insurance rates 15% over the next 2 years, so 7.5% a year. And people think that means the cap. That's the most they can raise it. But they're talking about the base rate. So
Oh, wow.
the retail price could be very vastly different than that. And so I'm waiting on my own auto insurance renewal to come in. And, we haven't had any tickets or wrecks. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. But the market is softening on the commercial side.
Yep. And I guess you've got all the issues about the roofs on, personal homeowners insurance. And that's a big issue where insurance companies don't even want to insure at all certain ages of roofs and things like that. So somebody buys a 30-year roof and they're in year 21 and the insurance company doesn't want to insure the roof, or they want to put a discount or a deductible on it, which can pretty much make the client pay for the roof, So a lot of things going on in our industry that are driving cost up.
Yeah, the severe convective storms are really the big thing on the property side right now. You heard about those tornadoes that went through in the Midwest just this weekend, did a lot of damage. That's what's scaring the insurance carriers the most.
Yep.
I mean, they always worry about hurricanes, but we haven't had, since Hurricane Irene a couple of years ago, we haven't had any big hurricanes that have impacted this market. But we're still paying premiums that are based on all those storms happening in the Midwest and the wildfires in California.
Yep.
So everybody's impacted.
Well, if you could believe it, we've already been talking for 26 minutes. It's hard to believe. It goes by fast. So I wanted to wrap up with put you on the spot and say, tell us one thing about you that a lot of people don't know.
Well, I was the Topsail High School typing champion.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah, I had 63 words per minute.
Yeah.
I remember typing. I was in typing class when Reagan got shot. I remember stopping our typing. But yeah, I mean, nobody knows that detail about me. But
that's amazing.
Yeah. And I attribute that to all of my success in insurance because I'm able to quickly get my thoughts out on paper.
How many words per minute could you type? I remember that was the big thing. Words per minute and number of errors is what it was.
I was 63 words per minute with high accuracy.
Wow.
So I don't know what that means this day and time, if that's good or bad, because I haven't typed on a typewriter in years.
But, it really does translate to the keyboard on your computer. And so, yeah, we took typing too. And I mean, the basic, you were supposed to get to 35 words a minute with 2 errors or something. And, I was able to do it. I mean, but you really did that skill translated to the computer keyboard. So I would have thought I would have heard more about that, Slade.
Well, it's something I haven't put on my resume, but I'm very proud of it.
You showed that, 67 words a minute. What is it? Well, I appreciate it. We'll wrap up here, and I thank you for your time, and I'm glad everything worked out that we could do this today.
Hey, Mitch, I always enjoy talking to you. I appreciate your time, too.
Thanks for listening to Entrepreneur Perspectives. This show is produced by Quiet Loud Studios, where we create podcast writing and original media. Learn more at quietloudstudios.com.